as Brianna said, we're talking about moving beyond generational labels, but you got to start talking about generations first, right? So we're running an experiment here.
Kids, I don't know what's wrong with these kids today. Kids, who can understand anything they say? Kids, they are disobedient, disrespectful oafs. Noisy, crazy, sloppy, lazy, loafers. While we're on the subject, kids, you can talk and talk to your faces blue. Kids, but they still do just what they want to do.
Hopefully you heard a little bit there of a classic musical, right? 1960s Bye Bye Birdie there, their song Kids These Days. We talk about generational change and we talk about generations in the workforce and what's going on here. We have to talk about how we talk about generations, right? And what do we see here? So we're moving beyond this area here. And I love to share that video because that's one of the earliest areas that I can find of a conversation where 40-something adults, 30-something, 40-something, 50-something adults are talking about kids these days, right? And they get the tongue in cheek there, but kids these days expect certain things, and they want that, and they just don't respect the world like we did. So as we talk about generations in the workplace, we're talking about a 5-generation workplace at this day and age. We have silents and traditionalists born 1925 to 45. These folks are almost out of the workplace, but there are still some that are hanging on age 75 to 96. Baby boomers, they are moving out of the workplace too, but we're talking about folks that are roughly about 56 to 75 years old now. Gen Xers, which Mike and I would probably agree is the greatest generation of all time here, aged 40 to 56. Millennials, aged 24 to 40, and Gen Z now is entering the workforce, which is ages 8 to 24. Now, as we talk about generations, I'm just gonna get it out here. I love this stuff. I find this stuff amazing to talk about. And I like going through the history of it and thinking about how people talk about generations. In part because people are so ruthless in the way they talk about what younger people should be doing with their lives, and not paying attention and not thinking critically about how they were when they were 18, 20, 22, 24, 30 years old and things like that. So here's an example of a discussion of the baby boomers, right? This is a 1986 letter to the New York Times that talks about how the baby boomers weren't into savings. They had no role models that came out, worrying about today and not thinking about tomorrow. They bought Cuisinarts. I guess Cuisinarts were the 1980s version of avocado toast, right? That we talk, you hear people saying that millennials can't buy a house today because they spend too much money on avocado toast and things like that. And we see the same sort of argument here in 1986 about baby boomers. Just a few years later, then apparently Gen X was the whiny generation here. They didn't even have to learn how to amuse themselves since mom and dad were always there to ferry them from one organized activity to another. They had every toy and every electronic device available. They whine that they're 28 and will never own a house, or they're 25 and don't have a high-paying job. We see the same sort of thing coming on with millennials, right? And this is an article from the New York Daily News in 2016 talking about how terrible the work ethic is of millennials, and that this person's assistant asked for a vacation 2 months after starting a job and right after being reprimanded here. And then she actually had the audacity to come back to work even after he'd fired her because she wasn't doing a good job. And can you believe at what millennials are doing and how terrible they are on the workforce? And of course, now that we have Gen Z coming into the workforce, we haven't seen the sort of the generational hit pieces, I like to call it, about how terrible they are at working. But we're seeing people saying like, hey, look how Gen Z speaks, right? Oh my gosh, they use the word cray cray because apparently crazy is not good enough. If you look at it in this here, they use photobomb, things like that. So as we're talking about generations in the workforce, again, I love this stuff because I find it hilarious how we change, right? And we start off as somebody like this. Somebody who is talking about the generation gap and the older generations don't understand us and life these days is hard and things like that. We turn into this guy right here, right? It's actually the same person. A guy named Richard Lorber was on the 1960s cover of Life magazine talking about the generation gap. Richard Lorber went on to found a film company that generated over $20 million annually in revenue, and then operated and became the chair of WinStar TV and Video. and he got older, right? That is what happens to us all. We get older and we become different people, and we change who we were from the time we were 20 to the time, I think he's in this picture, 55 or 60 years old. And that change then is what happens to us, and that change affects how we perceive what people should be doing. And yet we have a really idealized view of what we were like when we were 20 years old. And so what often happens when I talk about generations, when I hear people talking about generations, is I like to see it, I like to put this as the Abraham Simpson effect, right? I love this view right here. Old man yells at cloud, right? It's the, let me put my harumphing voice on here, that, these kids these days, they just don't do things like we used to do it here. And really what's going on is this Abraham Simpson view, right? That I used to be with it, but they changed what it was. Now what I'm with isn't it, and what it is seems weird and scary to me. And it will happen to you, right? I have a friend here that talks about college, and he talks about traditions that happen in colleges. And he says, traditions, what is traditional at every university in this country is what happens in the 4 years or 5 years that you're in that school. Everything beforehand, everything afterwards doesn't matter. The tradition matters in terms of restaurants, in terms of what you do, what happened there. And I like to think that we approach the workforce in the same way, right? That really the people who we perceive as working the best, right? The best group of workers out there are probably about 4 to 5 years on either side of our age. And so, for myself, people into their early 50s, into their early 40s, that's the range of people who really knew how to work. They understood the travails that I went through getting into the job site there, and they are folks that are more likely that they do the best job in the workplace, right? The baby boomers, I would say, baby boomers, they cause issues here. Millennials, boy, they cause issues. But those of us that are from about 42 to 52, we really know how to work in the workplace here, and we're the best employees. Now we know in reality, right, that this is all generational angst, and it's angst over getting old, of things being different, of perceptions of who we were when we were 25 versus who we are versus who we actually were at that point in time. And more importantly, I've got 60 years of examples of this generational angst. Where different generations, particularly older generations, are talking about younger generations and saying things like, boy, they don't really know how to work these days. They expect the world to be given to them, right? And where has that gotten us? Where has all this angst gotten us? And where have all these conversations gotten us? Now, there is some importance about being aware of generations at work and generational expectations. There are changes in the expectations of how people work, right? And we've seen this, and we can document this, that there is a change from a live to work to a work to live mentality. And we know that younger generations in the workplace now are expecting more flexibility, including both schedules, vacations, start and end times, things like that. And so that's something that as an employer, you have to be aware of and think about, that you can't just do things the way you've always done them because that's what you say, right? That there has to be some adaptation. We also know that younger workers expect input and aren't afraid to share their thoughts and ideas. And we see research out there that talks about employee engagement being the key. We also know that there are technological changes, and technological comfort and expectations have changed over time. And so we see the rise of digital natives, where technology is integral to our work, and we don't know how to work if the internet's not working, right? I run into that right now. Like if the internet's not working, what do I do? How do I find stuff and things like that? But it also means that as we are thinking about our workforce, we have retraining needs for workers who are adapting to new technologies. And we have to be cognizant of that as we are managing our workforce and thinking what they look like going forward. The other thing is that understanding the composition of the labor force can guide your workforce decisions, right? I like to share this graphic here, talking about the largest generation of labor force here. And for decades, it's been the boomers, right? They were the biggest generation of people that were working in the workplace conformed to their needs and desires. Us Gen Xers, I like to point out that we had a wonderful 3 years in the limelight where we were the largest generation in the labor force. It was glorious. It ended in 2015. And ever since then, millennials have been the largest generation in the labor force. So as we are looking at this generational change, as an employer, then you have to think about how are your workforce decisions guided by who is in the workforce, who is available to work for you, and what does that mean for you going forward. You take this out, and baby boomers are leaving the workforce, right? They are getting out of the workforce either by choice or not, and millennials are who's part of our workforce. And going back to millennials are no longer the kids these days, right? They are 40 years old. They are the oldest millennials are 40 years old. They are in the mid part of their career, and they are looking for different opportunities as a part of that. So as we talk about generations, I do like to run some a generational Quizlet for everybody here, right? So which generation held an average of 5.7 jobs from the ages of 18 to 24? If you said baby boomers, you were right. Bureau of Labor Statistics has done research, the longitudinal research, where they followed a cohort of baby boomers that were born between the ages of 1957 and 1964, and they've looked at what have they done in terms of jobs, right? How many jobs have they had? What have they seen those changes looking like here? And they found that on average, that cohort that they followed between the ages of 18 and 52, so what is that to be, about 34 years or so, that on average, that cohort held 12.3 jobs over that time. They found that from the ages of 18 to 24, that group of baby boomers had 5.7 jobs. The average fell to 4.5 jobs from 25 to 34, 2.9 jobs from 35 to 44, and 1.9 jobs from the ages of 45 to 52. And so what we see over time with baby boomers, right, is they had a lot of jobs when they were young. That's what happens. That is what people do. I hear that complaint about kids, they just don't want to stay with us these days. Well, guess what? That happened to their parents and their grandparents. So that is what we see that happens over time here. And what the expectation is that you, as employees get older, then the tenure would increase. Second question here, true and false. The median tenure for all wage and salary workers ages 25 or older was higher in 1983 when compared to 2018. That is false. The Employee Benefit Research Institute has found that in the median tenure for all wage and salary workers ages 25 or older in 2018 was equal to its level at 1983 at 5 years. So the average tenure for all wage and salary workers who are getting benefits in 2019 was the same as it was in 1983. And what they found over this research, that it was actually at its highest in 2014 at 5.5 years, and at its lowest in 1998 to 2002 at 4.7 years. So we haven't seen significant changes in that, even though the workforce has changed and even though the number of people has changed, and the number of people and what they're expecting in the workforce has changed. You're muted, Mike.
Sorry. So we're going to kind of change gears here. So it is very important to talk about generations in the workforce and how, we work with different generations and how the generations work with each other. But we're going to look at it from a different perspective moving forward today. Instead of focusing on what year you were born and what generation you're labeled as, we're going to look at where are you in your career. So with that, we have early career, we have mid-career, and we have late career. So that's what we're going to look at. When you're first starting out, and then that middle level where you're kind of moving on, and then that late career where you're eyeing retirement. So the things we're going to talk about, what does each cohort need from work? What are the reasonable expectations? And that's something that we're going to talk about a lot, is expectations, and how do we motivate and manage workers at each point in their career. So one thing I want to point out is we are going to talk about a lot of differences between these cohorts, but at the same time, we're going to talk about a lot of similarities, and you're going to hear me use the word expectations a lot. So just keep that in mind. And I want to make sure we understand, these are not stereotypes. These are trends that we've found over time through research. So every worker is different. We understand that every employee is different in different parts of their career, depending on what their goals are. But these are some of the trends that we see.
Mike, I will add things. We use the term early, mid, and late career intentionally because it depends on where somebody's able to retire, what point they are in their career, right? So like my brother-in-law is going to be able to retire in about 4 years. He's my age, right? So he's going to be in his early 50s and going to be able to retire. So he's probably more a late career worker at this point in time, as opposed to myself, who's probably more likely mid-career, right? Because my time horizon is going to be longer. So that's an intentional choice of words as we think about, it's not necessarily corresponds to age, but it's where you are in that career process.
Next slide. So here are some characteristics we see, some trends we see in the early career worker. most, of course, not all, are educated but not experienced, and they're questioning what does success look like? What do I want to do with my career? What does it mean to be successful? What are, when I come to work every day, what is expected of me? What are the norms? What are the expectations? Do I get a break at this time? Do I have vacation? Do I have to be at my desk at 8 o'clock every morning? Things of that nature. They're career oriented, but they're finding their way. So, like, I know that when I was early in my career, I came out of college as a teacher, but it became pretty obvious early on that that's not what I wanted to do with my career. So what does my career look like moving forward? Still just, okay, what kind of position am I looking for? What kind of company am I looking for? What kind of industry am I looking for? So they're really still trying to find their way. They want to be developed. So when you get to a company, you want to make sure that there's training, there's mentoring, and we'll talk about this more as well. Yeah, I may come in as an entry-level person, but I want to know that I can be developed to do the best job that I can. They want to be heard and valued. And along with being heard and valued, so a lot of times early career workers, they're not afraid to kind of voice their opinion. Hey, this is kind of what I'm looking for, or I don't understand why we're doing this, things of that nature. But they also, along those lines, a lot of times they want to know the why. Why am I doing this? You're obviously, again, this is not stereotypes. Obviously going to have workers that just come in and do their job and are content with doing that. But you see a lot of the early career workers that really, really value that. Why am I doing this? Why are we doing this? That why? And they often focus on wages over benefits. Retirement is way down the road. They're probably less likely to go to the doctor on a consistent basis. Maybe they don't want to pay, the co-pays or whatever it may be. So the benefits part, yeah, it's nice to have, but how much am I making? What is my check every week or 2 weeks or once a month, whatever it may be? That's what they're focused on now. I need to pay rent. What am I making? So, again, don't expect them to stay in the same job forever, but like Rob mentioned earlier, this has been going on for decades. This is not a new thing. They're searching for their focus in life. They're searching for what they want to do moving forward. So they are likely to job hop a little bit. This is not a new thing. We think it's a new thing, as Rob mentioned, but it's not. It's been going on for decades. Again, kind of going back, they're not afraid to question. They're going to request things that you're just like, wait a second, you're new here. Why are you asking me this complex question? Or why are you trying to delve so deep into the business? But that's part of their educational, that why. And again, this is something we're going to talk about a lot, is expectations. When I work with a client on workforce development or HR issues, this is the thing that I stress the very most, is expectations. But you need to follow up with them to make sure that they are meeting those expectations as well. And this is part of the training process that they go through is here's what we expect of you at the end of the week, at the end of the month, or this is what we want your job performance to look like, whatever that may be. But establish those expectations and follow through on them. So now let's move on to mid-career workers. Sorry.
Sorry, I skipped the slide, Mike.
There. That's all right. Again, clearly articulate those expectations and reinforce them, and discuss the future with them, and how you see their career at that company or that business going. I know Rob has told the story where early in his career, he left a job because he didn't see it progressing very much. And then when he went to hand in his resignation, they said, well, we had great expectations for you. We had great plans for you. And he goes, well, you never told me that. And at that point, it was kind of too late, So they didn't communicate that, yes, we have greater plans for you in the future. He thought he was stagnant, and so he moved on to a better opportunity. I know it's easy, and I've fallen into this with early career employees, is to just kind of brush them off. Okay, you'll learn as you go, blah, 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 blah. But it is really important to listen to them and answer the questions so that you can help develop them. And yes, they may not stay with your company forever, but you're still mentoring and you're still helping that person become a better career person. Provide the internal and external mentorship. We talked about this the other day. Mentorship can be very, very important, can be key, can be very helpful in the growth of the employee. And then with external mentorship, we'll talk about more maybe like professional development type opportunities, going to conferences, meeting somebody there that can help them out, connecting with somebody that doesn't necessarily work with that company, but has a very similar position, has been in that position longer, and it can help them grow as well.
Mike, I'll add just the key with mentorship is making sure that you have good people that are doing that work. And it's a chance then that you aren't having to supervise, but you are having people that demonstrate the expectations, what success looks like, and you help then younger employees learn that not just through the direct commands or directions that you're giving, but rather through the day-to-day activities of how people work.
So let's move on to mid-career. So these are the folks that are starting to hit their stride. They understand the workplace. They understand what's expected of them to, when they are at work, maybe not their job duties, but they know how to be professional in the workplace a little bit more. And they can be independent. They don't need quite as much supervision. Of course, there's still expectations, and we'll talk about that. And this is where we see, as Rob calls it, the great winnowing. This is where folks really decide, do they just want a job or do they want a career? And there's a big difference between the two. Do you want a career where you can continue to grow, be the best that you can be at it, or are you just looking to, go in, do your work the best you can, collect your paycheck, things of that nature. And this is kind of where we get that work to live or live to work comparison in that. A lot of times they're ready for that responsibility. Okay, I've been doing this for so long. I have the knowledge. I'm ready to be a little bit more responsible. Maybe I'll be doing the mentoring myself. But they want to do more. They've waited their turn. They've paid their dues, as we always like to say. But they also like that now that these are the folks that are starting to have families. They have other responsibilities in their life besides just work. So they need that a little more of that work-life balance. Of course, they want to be heard. This is one of those similarities, is they want to be heard and valued as well, but maybe at a little bit different level as the early careers. Maybe they're looking to be more decision makers than the early careers. So that's what we mean by want to be heard and valued on this level. And benefits start to matter. Of course, so do wages. Again, going back to the family thing, they've got families, they've got a mortgage, they've got whatever else it may be. Now they're looking, starting to have an eye in retirement. Maybe, as we get older, we all know, health becomes more important and you're more likely to go to the doctor more. So health insurance is very important. And with those leave policies, whether it be vacation, sick time, personal time off, whatever it may be, with more family responsibilities, they really look at, okay, how much time do I get off? It's never a good idea, as Rob said, during the job interview, when does my vacation start? Or 2 weeks after the fact, when does my vacation start? That's not exactly what we're talking about here. But it does become more and more of a priority because of those other responsibilities.
Mike, I'll just add quickly that family responsibilities in this kind of cohort tend to go both ways, right? So they have kids, and and many, not everybody, but a lot have kids, and you start to see the kid responsibilities. But it's also a group that we are seeing increasingly conversations about that they are responsible for caretaking their parents, right? That they have to take their parents are aging, and they are having to make sure that their parents are sick and they have to take care of them in the hospital. They have to get them out of their house, things like that. And so there's family responsibilities coming at this group from both sides, and that's kind of a key. That's again why leave and that balancing responsibility with time becomes so important. This big career work.
Great point. Great point. So what are expectations for the mid-career? You expect them to be able to do the work. There's probably not as much training, on-the-job training. They probably at some point have learned the job, and so expect them to be a little more independent. Not that they don't need to be possibly supervised, but they're able to do the work and don't need the constant attention that maybe an early career does. They're going to stay in the job a little bit longer. There's still, the possibility that they can leave. Maybe they have a better opportunity. Maybe there's not growth opportunities in the current company, and there's another company or organization that there are those growth opportunities, because a lot of mid-career employees and workers, that's what they start to really look for, is what does my growth look like? Am I stagnant here, or are there opportunities where I can move up the ladder, so to speak? And obviously, with more experience, they expect a little higher compensation. I think it's, Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think maximum compensation potential is around 42, 43, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, 42 or 43 is generally what the maximum compensation potential is. And so, that's when they're really starting, okay, I've got the family. I've got, like I said again, I've got a home or rent or whatever it may be. So, I need to be making a little bit more money, and again, that's where that growth potential comes in.
And Mike, I'll add this. Quickly, I was just going to interject. This is also the point, like where you see people who are deciding, I'm going to move up to that director's position or that vice president's position, or I'm looking for that because compensation and responsibility are intersecting there. And I know if I don't do it in my mid-career, that opportunity is going to pass me by, right? That's sort of the conversation that's being weighed right here.
Right. And we've already discussed, the family and the other commitments, so that's going to impact them at times can become priority. Again, like Rob said, not only, kids and childcare and things of that nature, but also taking care of parents. We have a coworker that, she has to take care of her parents, and she really values that time off to be able to do that. Development and training still matters. We never stop learning, and I think that's an important lesson for mid-career workers. You always want to be learning more about what you're doing and enhance your skills. This age group, which is Rob and I's age group, we didn't come up in the world with technology. Yeah, we may have had an Atari or a Nintendo. But my first job, my second job, I guess, but I was 24, was right when the internet was becoming mainstream in the workplace. I didn't know what the heck was going on, so it took me a long time to learn that. And I guess that would have been in my early career. But what it taught me was, even in the middle of my career, which I think I am, hopefully, is that I constantly need to start learning. There's still new technology coming out every single day. We have to learn how to use it. And so it's important to make sure that we're keeping up with that development and training. There's always different developments in the workforce. There's different developments in business. There's different developments. So we have to keep up on those things.
Mike, I'll just quickly interject. The training is different though than the 20s, right? The training now might be training of how to be a manager as opposed to how to be a worker. I had that transition a few years ago, and that was a hard transition because even though I thought I was ready for it, nobody ever actually taught me how to manage, right? They never taught me how to do performance evaluations effectively, how to manage people moving forward. So that development and training then is about how am I moving into that next phase of my career.
And that's a good point, because I kind of went through the same thing at one time. You know, I entered at an entry-level job and I ended up being the day-to-day operations manager of a $100 million company, and I was learning on the fly. You know, kind of like Lee said, it's like, I don't know how to do this. So you'll constantly, and a lot of that is company-based, but a lot of it can also be self-motivated as well. So again, one of the similarities to the early career is clearly articulate your expectations. Just because someone is more advanced in their career and can do the work probably with less supervision, there still needs to be those expectations. You know, what kind of productivity we're looking at out of you, and you know, maybe more in this case, it's also we want you to make sure that either officially or unofficially are mentoring some of the younger folks, the new folks coming in. You know, so expectations, again, expectations. And these are the folks that generally will want more responsibility. So give them responsibility whenever possible. This is, I know, again, kind of personal experience. This is something that makes me feel good in the workplace, is when I get responsibility. You know, it shows trust in that employee that they can do the job. And it kind of gives you what I always call, informally, of course, the warm fuzzy. And kind of going back to expectations, you know, give them responsibility to mentor new employees, to do the training, to help them out, to guide them as they go, answer the questions. And as a supervisor, this could, you know, kind of eases up some of your time, and you can use what I call that, or we all call that, institutional knowledge that employee has already built up. Continue to discuss the plans and see their career developing at your business. Kind of going back to Rob's example is, you know, make sure that they know that there is an opportunity to grow, or, you know, if there's not, you know, maybe have that hard, difficult discussion with them. It's like, you know what, we don't really know the size of our company. We don't know if there's going to be any growth availability. And that's just to kind of help them make decisions in their own career. Provide flexibility. Recognize that they have those responsibilities with family that are impacting them. That can be through paid time off, vacation, sick leave, personal time, whatever that may be. Again, as what I mentioned, you know, they have child responsibilities. There are times when daycare is not open because there are a number of students sick, and so one of the parents has to stay home. And then on the flip side of that, you know, they may have aging parents in which they need to get them to the hospital visits or to a nursing home or whatever it may be. So it is important to make sure that you provide them with that flexibility, and it's that work to live, not live to work.
Mike, I'll just add quickly, even in a flat organization, you know, so a small business that's a flat organization, there's still ways you can give people responsibility that aren't necessarily just with increased job titles or different positions, right? It can be asking them to mentor new employees. It can be having them as a trusted co-counsel, right? It can be something like where you maybe give them, you devolve some of your duties off to them. You ask them to do some of that work there as a way to allow you to focus on other things as the owner, but it gives them more responsibility and more work. Makes them feel like they're growing. They're not doing the same thing that they've been doing for the last 20 years, right? That they have different challenges, and that helps invigorate people in the workplace.
Well, and I'll add to that too, as you mentioned job titles. Sometimes it can be as simple as a job title, because it just makes them feel kind of more important to the company, and they may not be getting a raise or technically a promotion, but if you elevate that job title, that can also help with that morale. All right, so let's move on to late career. These are the folks that are very experienced. They've actually been in the workforce quite a while, unless they're like Rob's brother-in-law who can retire at 50. But they do have an eye on retirement, so they're thinking more of, okay, so I'm just trying to, I want to do a great job, but I know that retirement is close. So this is one of those situations where it's not stereotypical, because I know my dad and my mother, they're not ever going to retire, because it's just not in their personality. But for a lot of folks, especially that are very career oriented, retirement is looming for this late career workers. So the folks on the end of their career, they want to maximize their responsibility, and they actually kind of want to leave a legacy at their job. So it's something maybe that they leave institutional knowledge, that they have developed a process or something in that nature that helps the company grow or has helped the company grow. So looking at that, they really want to look at their legacy. Late career workers right now, of course, have had to develop as technology has changed over the years. If we look at the late career workers at this day, in this day and age, there was really no technology. I mean, technology was the typewriter that was in a calculator. Now internet has changed everything. Social media has changed everything. Different softwares, proprietary softwares, how we do data entry, how we look at data, how we do sales. We've got Salesforce, things of that nature. So that development and the use of technology still is changing and needs to be updated. And of course, they still want to be heard and valued. We've seen this in the other two cohorts. Their experience is recognized more. So this is more of, I don't want to use the term advice giving, but it's more of, I've been there, done that kind of thing. So let me help you manage through this time right now. Here's how I see it. Please let me know how you see it. Maybe we can work through it together. And benefits definitely matter more than wages. By this time, hopefully they've reached the maximum compensation potential. They've saved some money for retirement. They've had some contributions to their retirement through their employer, either with match or coming out of their check every 2 weeks, whatever they may be. And then obviously, as we get older, healthcare definitely becomes more and more important as we get along. So what are expectations? So these are least likely to leave. They're focused on retirement. They don't want to start a new job. They don't want to start a new career. They're not really as worried about advancement as much. They just, they're looking to finish it out. They're a little more content in what they're doing. And so, so they're not looking at job hop at this point. But at this point in their careers, they've probably hit their potential compensation limit or top compensation. And along with that comes costs with that compensation, whether it be payroll taxes, whether it be health insurance, whether it be retirement. But this is a trade-off for the experience that they have, that institutional knowledge that they can pass on to the new generation that's coming in. And so along with that, they can provide lessons to new employees coming in through mentorship, institutional knowledge. Here are the expectations in the workplace. Simple as, here's what time you can take a break, things of that nature. Here's how we operate here at this company. So what they're basically effectively doing is preparing the folks that will replace them. And so they're providing that counsel and using that institutional knowledge. You'll find a lot of the later late career workers that they are eager to do that. They want to pass on the knowledge that they've built up over several years in the workplace. So again, we're going to go back to expectations. Training to build skills and maintain focus, and that can be, when someone does have their eye on retirement, one foot out of the door, as we sometimes say. We need to make sure that they are still focused on productivity and it may be short-term goals, short-term returns, but we still would like to see them being productive in what they're doing every day. But we definitely want to use their knowledge and experience, again, that institutional knowledge, draw on them to pass that along to new employees or younger employees or folks that may be moving into more management positions, that they can pass along, okay, this is how you do this is how you do that. Like Rob said, this is how you do an employee evaluation or things of that nature. And definitely want to try to, the best you can, we know it's not always possible, especially with small businesses, is to meet their needs for security and benefits. So, if you can provide some sort of retirement plan, some sort of healthcare plan, that goes a long way with the LateCareer worker, a lot more than how much you're actually paying them. And accommodate their changing needs. Rob, you want to take this one?
Sure, it's just a recognition that, again, like as they've gotten older, as the population's gotten older, it's closer to retirement, that the need for time and flexibility is different. There are a number of examples of people who maybe aren't quite ready to retire fully yet, but they're looking for 60% or 80% of what they have been doing, right? So if you can accommodate that, they're a good worker, they really contribute still, but they want to work 3 days a week instead of 5. Finding a role for them, with that you have to take some responsibility off their plate and move it around. But again, being able to help them still have a role in your business, but at the same time allow them to start the transition out of work.
Thanks. And so, this kind of leads to, in this situation, with these workers, you're going to lead them more than boss them. It's not a situation where you're looking over the shoulder all the time. They've been in the job, they've done the job, they've had careers. They're more likely to be self-motivated. But at the same time, you want to lead them, let them know those expectations, but don't make it more of, you've got to do this kind of thing. They know what they're doing. So lead them, don't boss them.
So kind of the key part of it here, I'll just end with is, as you think about your workforce and who you have, paying attention to where they are at different points of their career is important. And then that can be with how you work with different employees. So you might work with somebody who's new and you might have to approach them this way. Somebody who's a big career, you might have to approach them differently. And then figuring out how to balance those needs there. There's actually a great question from Brooke right here that talked about asking their employees what they value in benefits and compensation, and what do you do if a different generation of employees want different things? And that's where the hard decisions come, right? I think that's I can speak from experience, and I've mentioned on this that spent some time working in labor relations, and I distinctly remember working with a school district where we negotiated new contracts, and you had a bifurcated workforce, right? You had a group of folks that were later career, and you had a group that were early career, and you didn't have much in the middle there. And we had to think through carefully how we allocated benefits and compensation, whether it's to longevity payments, whether it was to health insurance, whether it was to base wage increases, and think about that as a strategy for how do we keep different parts happy there. One of the ways that we did that was that we started, we did, these were 1 or 2 year contracts. And so in one contract, we said we agreed that we would put money on the longevity payments and retirement. The next contract, we put it in the base wage increases and things like that, and trying to balance that out. But that's where, as a leader in a company, that's where you make your money, right? You figure out that as a strategic perspective, and you have to then, you essentially have to balance what your needs are and what you're doing there. I don't know, Mike, if you have anything to add on that.
Well, on the benefit side, one thing I could say is, if you find a good health care provider or a health insurance provider, they'll have different levels of payment, so to speak, or different levels of care. So your newer folks may go for the lowest level where they're only getting $50 taken out of their check and you're only matching $50. But the late career person is going to be looking more at I'm going to the doc, need to go to the doctor quite often for checkups or whatever it may be. And so they're going to choose the higher level, knowing that more money is probably going to be coming out of the check, but those benefits, that health benefit is a lot more of a priority than the early career. So that's something to look at as well.
Part of it, I think, is yeah, as a business leader, then you have to consider what makes sense with your employee strategy, right? You're going to be signaling things with how you structure that to prospective employees. You're going to be signaling to them, what do they, what do you think, what do you see for them career-wise, right? And that can be, I can say, with retirement plan changes, you see a lot of companies have done. One of the unintended consequences of that, if you have if you, instead of going from a pension to a 401k, one of the unintended consequences is that the signal has been to employees, and they have taken it this way, that, okay, you don't expect me to work my career here, right? You expect, and so this allows me to be flexible, and you've made that as a business choice, but at the same time, it doesn't tie you to the company the same sort of way. So that, that's a consideration here, right? That if you have a pension plan, and those are incredibly rare these days, and small businesses don't have them, that ties you in a different way than a 401k does. And again, if you're putting more money into healthcare, then that's signaling to employees who your workforce is and what you expect from them. A great question, though. That's a challenge, right? That's a challenge for